met Jack a number of years ago. I was still working for Arizona Public Service Company then. But there was a Coal-Reliant Communities Innovation Challenge workshop held in Charleston, West Virginia. And so I went out to West Virginia to see what this was all about. And that's where I first began to meet communities like us who are coal-reliant and trying to figure out what's our next step. How do we begin to move forward as the mines shut down, as power plants shut down? What's the next step? And this was back in November of 2015. This was during a period when I happened to be in different board meetings at APS, and they were talking about, do we get out of Navajo Generating Station? Do we look at closing Cholla? What happens with Four Corners power plant? So again, those discussions were happening, and so that began to get me interested in what's our plan B here in San Juan County? Where do we go from here? Again, that workshop was the stimulus towards a regional report that was developed by the Northwest New Mexico COG, looking at the regional economic assessment and strategies for the three-county region. That then culminated into the Four Corners Future Forum. That's how that started. And then again, as we had that, I happened to be with Mike and other folks in the region here. We then met again in Denver, Colorado at the Strengthening Economies in the West. So I've known Jack, and he's been involved in working with communities across the nation. He's the senior project manager for the National Association of Counties Future Lab team. And again, they work with all 3,069 counties within the nation. He handles resilient economies and community programming. And currently his work is focused on economic diversification and revitalization, especially in the rural and the coal-impacted communities, looking at energy planning, development, land use planning, and disaster resilience. He is a part of the National Association of County Planners. He's a member of the American Institute of Certified Planners. And again, he's been working with communities throughout the nation, finding out what they're doing and providing an avenue from which information could be shared between communities on what works and what doesn't work. And so he's here to share his knowledge and his expertise with us. And I'd like to bring Mr. Jack Morgan. Please welcome him with your applause. Jack.
Thank you so much, Arvin. I think I'll kind of stand out here and not be behind the podium if that's all right with you. Hopefully you guys can hear me all right. I'm double mic'd here. Thanks so much, Arvin, and thanks to all you guys. It's great to be here in Farmington and San Juan County and New Mexico, the land of enchantment. It's only my second time that I've been here to New Mexico and first time to this part of the state. So it's great to be here with you guys, and I look forward to learning more about the goings on and your all's plans and updates from Arvin and the group. I really get way more out of that than I think you guys will get out of my talk, but I will, as Arvin said, try to kind of walk through just a little bit of lessons learned that we've seen in our time in working with coal communities, and then track just some of the community examples, and then we'll certainly save time for discussion. As Arvin said, I do remember it well. It was exactly November 2015 when I met Arvin. I remember that because it was my first day on the job at NACO. I had previously been working in Virginia, in the Appalachian coal-impacted area of Virginia where I'm from. So while I currently live in Washington, D.C., you may catch a little bit of my twang and Appalachian accent sneak out here and there. And so that's explaining where I'm from. And we had actually put together a team for the Coal-Reliant Communities Challenge, and that led me to find out about NACO and want to be involved with NACO. And by the time we came to Charleston for that event was my first day actually working for NACO. So that's always a funny story I like to tell, but also just to give you a little bit of a background of, yeah, this is my day-to-day job, but also my personal passion, and this is coal-reliant communities, my homeland of being in Appalachia, and so it means a lot to me personally to see communities like you all that are faced with economic shock and questions for the future to come together and build ideas. So, okay, perfect, that worked. Just a little bit about myself, and then certainly want to make sure I include my partner in crime in a lot of our efforts for the past 6 years is the National Association of Development Organizations and Brett Schwartz. So NACO and NATO have been working on these programming hand in hand, really recognizing that economies don't stop at county lines or town lines, and that thinking about these efforts regionally is really critical. And so NATO represents your Council of Governments and Economic Development Districts across the country as well. And as Arvin said, just stepping back a little bit too, for those unfamiliar, NACO, we're a membership organization. We're based in Washington, D.C., and we represent the 3,069 county governments across the country. As you might imagine, being in Washington, D.C., advocacy is a big role of what we do in representing counties and United County Voice. But my work is more of coming to these events and interacting with you all, the best practices, the peer learning, facilitating educational workshops and resources. So Brett and I and others have been had the great pleasure of traveling the country for the past 6 years, as I said, focusing on a lot of the work in coal communities, hosting events, interacting with coal-impacted communities, and trying to facilitate them together and share the peer learning opportunities. Let's take a little bit, a second here, and talk about coal and what we're talking about when we talk about coal communities. I'm a geography guy, so we got to have maps. And so hopefully that's coming through for you. You hear a lot about in media now, and certainly in the past several presidential elections, coal country, all this. So really, what is that? And sometimes with you all, and this is feedback we've gotten since 2015, that oftentimes with the day-to-day and so focused on your community, don't realize that you're not alone in this. So there are over 150 counties, and we do need to update this a little bit, so probably a little less than that now, that are coal producing. And you'll see that on the map on the left. So that does represent a little bit more of your traditional what you might think of as coal country, with the west there, Appalachia, and then of course you've got a middle belt there in southern Illinois, Indiana, western Kentucky, and down in Alabama, and even down in Texas. The map on the right, though, is coal-fired power plants. As you'll see there, that's a little bit more widespread. That is really makes this a national issue, frankly. You'll see that obviously the coal communities of the map on the left are represented, but it's across all geographies. And so really showing the national impact. Over 330 counties across the country have at least one coal-fired power plant. So as we know, a lot of those communities, many of them, almost all perhaps, are facing significant challenges right now. And whether that's of job loss currently or timed for the future and a lot of uncertainty, that poses a lot of challenges, and it's a daunting situation. However, I always like to frame presentations and the work we do with this mural. This is from Main Street in Gillette, Wyoming, which is Campbell County, the #1 coal-producing county in the nation. And I don't know why I'm drawn to this so much. One, I think it's just a great example of creative placemaking, and we can talk about that as a strategy. But I think the message is really on point. Change inspires creativity. Crisis can inspire creativity, and I think it's not to belittle the problem, but what you've seen, let me look at the people here in this room. We've seen people in similar gatherings across the country really coming together, recognizing that spark, that the need to really jump and create plans and action for the future of their community. And that, if anything, is what I think NACO and NATO have sought to do and have done. And that's really to facilitate coal-reliant community leaders together, have them learn from each other as far as peer learning, hear that they're not alone in this, but really to have intentional time to spend away from your day-to-day with leaders in your own community to hammer out a vision and a plan, think about your assets, and build that vision for your future, right? And that's been our mantra, and I think that's what it's all about. And we are here to guide and connect you to resources. Obviously, especially now, the federal government, there's a lot of funding and financial resources being made available too, and that is certainly, we're certainly grateful for that, but really the direction and in the effort and the implementation is the people here in this room. And that's what we just want to help facilitate. And as Arvin mentioned, we have done this through a variety of peer learning events, and most recently we did a Coal-Reliant Communities Challenge in which we had 11 teams, came together in Denver just for that model. Like we learned from each other, yes, but really it was intentional time for folks to drill down on action plans, and we'll talk a little bit about what some of those were. I always like to include this mural too, as kind of we work through framing this, as kind of hits on what I was saying. We can provide some of the guidance, we can connect you all with other leaders, but you are the ones you've been waiting for. You guys know your community, you guys know the assets here, the players. It's about convening those, finding champions, finding the spark plugs. Maybe you pick one or two things from another community and you tailor it back to yours. But we know this can't be done cookie cutter, and it's not a one-size-fits-all approach. But I maintain that it cannot also happen in a vacuum, and we have to work together at this as coal communities across the country. And this is not unique to coal either. And our nation has seen economic transitions, and communities have seen economic transitions for the past several decades, a century. You think about timber or automotive or textiles, et cetera. And so there's lessons learned to be had from those communities as well. So we're going to talk a lot about resilience in our work and here today, and really thinking about, okay, what is resilience? We hear that a lot as a buzzword just in society and in talking about economic resilience. And I put this slide in here too with a nod back towards NATO and thinking regionally about resilience too. But really when we're talking about resilience is how can you react and withstand a shock or disaster crisis of any kind, be it natural disaster, economic shock, et cetera. And so it is important to think about this regionally. As I said, economies and shocks are not going to be limited to county lines. And there's ability to pull more resources. But obviously we know regional looks different in different places. In Appalachia, there may be 10 counties in the same size geography of San Juan County. And so oftentimes in the West with a large county, the county is the region. But as Arvin and Mike and the team worked across state line with La Plata County and Durango, I believe, for that Denver convening. So there are opportunities and really encourage think about this regionally as well. And so I always like to come back to this quote as well when you think about resilience and what we're talking about here with coal communities. Legendary Virginia basketball coach Bob Johnson kind of retooled this, I think maybe from a John Wooden quote, but when your opportunity arrives, it's too late to prepare. And so I think that can go across the board for almost anything in your life and across society, but certainly when it comes to community planning and whether it's for a natural disaster or for economic shock or what have you. We know there's going to be changes. Change is the only constant. It's about thinking ahead, being ready to be prepared when that shock happens. Are you prepared? And we hear a lot about this term too, economic diversification. So that really is a way to look at it as one strategy to how to build resilience and how to be prepared for an economic shock or crisis, particularly when you're talking about a reliance on one industry such as coal. So just kind of a little bit of, and these next slides are from another critical partner of our team for the past 6 years, Eric Pages with EntreWorks Consulting, and I'll be happy to share his info with you guys afterwards, as well as all these slides and much more info, hopefully, right, Arvin? Yeah. Great. And so Eric's a wealth of knowledge, but really what we're talking about, dictionary definition, a varied mix of industries and the absence of a dominance of any one industry in terms of employment or income. I think we're all familiar with that, but also take a look at what it can also vary. Obviously it is a region's goods and services, that's what we're talking about, but also a how, looking at a diversity of talent base. Do you have too many of any one talent cluster or job or occupation? You think about maybe Silicon Valley or kind of too overloaded in a tech cluster of employment, or a why, the region's suppliers or customers. By many dictionary definitions, let's say in Arlington, Virginia, right across from DC, is very economically diverse as far as sectors, but ultimately is very reliant on one supplier, being the federal government. So that's something to keep in mind too when talking about economic diversification, a region's suppliers and customers. Just a little bit of, again, some stuff we worked with Eric and came up with in our lessons learned, or from what we think places that successfully diversify their economy do. They tend to do their research, right? I think that's critical, not coming at it blindly, attending events like this, attending the Coal Reliant Communities Challenge, connecting with other communities afterwards, but then also, having a frank and honest conversation about your strengths and weaknesses and what you need to work on and what really assets you have in your community. And as Arvin said, I'm a planner by trade, and so a lot of these lessons learned that you'll see here, come back to community planning and a little bit more focused on those perhaps. But planning is not just putting, and it's great that Arvin and other community teams have put together plans on paper and acting on that, and that's what we've encouraged folks to do through our efforts, but it's not done there. Planning is an ongoing process. There's no point in continuing along with something that you put in a plan if that's not working or you need to go a new direction. So continuing to have these quarterly meetings like you guys are facilitating here and with your breakout groups, as Arvin was telling me, that's awesome to make sure that you're still assessing and planning is an ongoing process. It builds regional consensus, builds that buy-in, provides accountability. When we ask at the Coal Reliant Communities Challenge, to make sure of each action, who are the stakeholders, who are going to be responsible for these, and encourage communities to think about that. And then lastly, integrate new leaders. And that's really critical for what we're talking about here, and that's beyond maybe your traditional economic development folks. And I think that is really seen here in this room. Bring together a wide swath of folks from your community, from your region, that maybe they're not a professional economic developer, but they're passionate about their community, have a lot of resources you can leverage. And make that be diverse in the faces that you have across the board, and great to see that here in this room. Often when I do a lot of these talks, I'm the youngest person in the room, and I think that's just a little bit natural, but I would encourage you guys to be a little bit more intentional about that too. And that's not just a millennial here on Soapbox saying that we know everything, but if you're thinking about an economy that you want to have for the future forum, that why would you not want to have the folks that are going to be potentially living in your community be involved in that planning process? What jobs do you want to have? What would make you want to live in this community? What do you not like about this community that we can change? And I think that's really critical, and that can even be down into the high school, middle school level. Engaging with those folks, I think, is a really worthwhile and valuable strategy. I'll run through this really quickly. Arvin, make sure you keep me on time here. I could talk about this all day and want to make sure we get to some of the community examples. But really, leverage all resources that you can, and that's not just money. That's partnerships, that's experience, expertise, maintain and build local capacity, doing a lot of that here through Four Corners, and incorporate a broad array of perspectives. We talked a little bit about that already, beyond siloing too. I was talking a little bit with Arvin about how, and oftentimes this was the case in Appalachia, that even within a community there's so many silos of we're tourism, we're workforce, we're economic development, we're the regional cog, and to make sure we're all moving in the same direction instead of separately. I'll go through this a little quickly too. Eric, as I mentioned, is really the entrepreneurship guru, and that's been a big strategy that we've seen communities look at. It may be a strategy here in San Juan and in Farmington, and would love to learn more about that. But just some data here about the importance of, I think we're all familiar with that, the importance of local business, and they're involved in the community, and that money is circulated throughout the community. How do we build entrepreneurship though, and that ecosystem and that culture has been what a lot of communities are really looking at, and Eric will tell you that oftentimes when we're talking about how we build entrepreneurship, the funding is the first question that a lot of communities say, or a lot of the people in the practitioners are saying we need capital, and that's certainly important. But if you don't have the knowledge or an ecosystem for entrepreneurship, a landscape for them to function, to be professional entrepreneurs, allowing them to have funding might not be as worthwhile as possible. So just some things here that Eric has mentioned, and I really like that he always talks about a playing field for innovators. So is there a space, whether that's intentional or not, could be just a coffee shop, it could be a building like this. Is there a place where entrepreneurs can gather organically or scheduled to talk shop, share resources, share ideas, and what role that the county or the region needs to have is kind of just to be there, facilitate and help as needed, but really let these folks have an opportunity for peer learning themselves. Quickly, I'm not sure how many people are familiar with just kind of going over the multiple capitals or the wealth works theory. Obviously, when we're talking about coal impacted communities, and jobs is huge, and that's the real concern is job loss, and of course local tax revenue back to your community. But it is important to think about and take advantage of and leverage these other 8 capitals. I won't go through them all, but individual, intellectual, social capital. Social capital is really big, and we'll talk a little bit about that in some of the county examples. But think about your own network, and whether it's your friends or colleagues or professional folks. Do you think everyone in the community has a similar kind of sphere of networks, and how can we continue to build your alls too? And that's bigger than just, okay, I have a Rolodex full of a lot of people. That's, if I do have a job loss, I can connect a friend to an opportunity, or I can connect someone to, any number of things. And it also helps build community buy-in too, when you have a lot of social capital and relationships in a community. Cultural, I think you guys are well aware of that here. Natural, political, built, financial. Happy to send you guys more deeper dive on WealthWorks and the 8 capitals, but just something to think about too, that it is, obviously you want to be measured by metrics like jobs and tax revenue, but these are kind of some intangible things to also think about. All right, so now I'll just kind of walk through a little bit about a snapshot of what some of the communities across the country have been working on. as far as their strategies for diversification and economic resilience? Short answer, it is a lot, and it's diverse, and it's really exciting. And I say, we talked about how to always word this slide, like strategies that work or best practices, and really I think what they're working on, because and I get this question every day too, is what's a great example of a community that's been successful in diversifying their economy? And we can talk a lot about these different strategies, and certainly there are some communities that have been really successful, but it's a work in progress, right? That we're talking about reinventing and retooling local economies. So that takes time, but there's a lot going on, and you guys know the challenge that it's simultaneous to stop the bleeding in a lot of communities or prepare for that shock in the short term. How can we make sure folks that have been dislocated have jobs or retraining for other jobs, while simultaneously long-term planning for that future economy, right? So I'll talk a little bit more about Southwest Virginia than maybe you've ever heard about ever in your life. And that is just because I'm biased and that's where I'm from. But they're doing a really lot of cool things. And then we'll hit on some other Appalachian communities that you guys might not hear about as much here in the West. And then we'll touch on some Western communities too. So I'm sure when you guys hear Virginia, you probably think D.C. or Richmond or history of George Washington and all, but there's an entire half of the state that's closer to about anywhere from 4 to 8 state capitals in Richmond, as you see there in that corner of the map. So truly Appalachian, the first frontier was an agriculture economy for generations, and then developed into manufacturing and textiles and furniture and many parts, and then coal in the western part. My home county of Washington County for many years was the headquarters of Alpha Natural Resources, which at one time grew to be the second largest coal company in the nation. Some of the work that they've been doing, I'll walk through a little bit about that in different parts. Asset-based economic development, then they're doing a lot of technical and retraining and exciting work in energy space and entrepreneurship as well. I'm not sure if we have any country music fans here in New Mexico, or traditional roots music. Anybody heard of the Crooked Road? All right, nobody. You'll have to report back to do some advertising in New Mexico. The Crooked Road is Virginia's heritage music trail. It's really honing in on that cultural heritage of where country music started, the Big Bang in Bristol, Virginia, and Tennessee. With recordings from Jimmie Rodgers, the Carter Family. If you guys watched the Ken Burns documentary on country music, there was a lot of Southwest Virginia. So this effort really wanted to connect those communities together with that culture and heritage. And they have folks come across from across the world to the region now, and they've been able to do downtown revitalization and a kind of a string of pearls theory of these communities and a network there for live music and culture, and help create a more livable place for folks to want to come back and live. All that with a rebranding campaign, as you see the top right. And then outdoor recreation, really doing a crooked road, if you will, for the natural assets that are truly world-class in the region, from the Appalachian Trail. Okay, you guys have heard of that, right? Right? Okay, gotcha. Just making sure. Appalachian Trail, we've got probably about the 5 highest mountains in Virginia right there in the region. The Daniel Boone Wilderness Trail and Cumberland Gap. So really kind of just collecting all the assets and branding them for outdoor recreation. Communities realizing that they have natural assets that are above ground in addition to below ground. And then building off of that into entrepreneurship, then how do we connect that to commerce? And so efforts like Opportunity Southwest Virginia and Rally Southwest Virginia started really in the town of Marion, where they did a small business challenge, pop-up shop campaign, essentially. They're called different things. You guys may have heard of different ones or have any here, where they partnered with the local bank and some other partners and really kind of had a challenge for entrepreneurs to come together and think about a business plan and have coaching, and then ultimately a winner would receive funding for for business. And we actually had Doug Jackson from Virginia. I can share much more info on his slides. Come to one of our events in Colorado, and they took that idea and implemented it in Western Colorado. The rally campaign then is how do you connect those champions in the community to the entrepreneurs? They may be the same people, and kind of have that buy-in for your community. The rally stands for Real Action Learning Leaders, and the Y, as Doug would say, stands for yay. Because we got to celebrate our small victories, right? And through this program, some of the entrepreneurs and communities themselves do receive money from the state for implementing projects that really kind of spark the community. So here's a little bit more about what they're doing on kind of the technical side or the energy side. They partner with their community college, which that's a big trend we've seen, and would encourage, I'm sure you guys are already partnering with the college here for drone technology, to have classes there, both in testing, but also in kind of the manufacturing and in that piece as well. I'll send, after all this, a link to the Invest Southwest Virginia effort. It's really a really incredible public-private partnership that's looking at unique ways to take the assets of the region, mostly from former coal assets, for new economic development. So that includes some pump storage and hydro. I was talking a little bit with Arvin about that, from utilizing some of the abandoned mine lands and other reservoirs and such there in the community, but also looking at data centers is a big push for theirs. On the complete other side of the state, Loudoun County, near DC, the most wealthiest county in the country, that's where 70% of the internet traffic goes through. And I'm actually going on a tour next month to one of those data centers. When they say in the cloud, like that's what we're talking about. That's where internet traffic goes through. And so Southwest Virginia really wants to partner with those efforts to offer cheaper lands and water and geothermal cooling to have more data centers down in that part of the region, and paired with renewable energy as well. And I'll speed it up, guys. I'm sorry. I could just talk about this for a while. And lastly, one of the things they're working on in Southwest Virginia with Invest Southwest Virginia is getting back to agriculture roots. I think that's one of the things in common, too, when you look across coal communities in Appalachia and in the Midwest and in the West, is there was always an agriculture piece of the economy, most often before coal. And that still today remains an opportunity. Agriculture may have changed a little bit, and there's new approaches to it. You're talking about value-add agriculture and et cetera. But this is an exciting project to growing barley again in Southwest Virginia to capitalize on the rise in craft beer, right? And you see there a brewery in Virginia, the Appalachian Ale, using that barley from Southwest Virginia, and there's a huge local foods scene in the region too, which connects back to asset-based economic development as well. I'll go quickly through the rest of these. Arvin gave me the stoplight here. I definitely want to get to Q&A. I'll send you guys in a recap a video from West Virginia of Coalfield Development Organization. I'm not sure if anybody's heard of this effort. They're a nonprofit dedicated to kind of some really truly innovative retraining, but also social enterprise and giving people life skills and starting businesses and everything from woodworking to solar to ag. They learn the life skills and they get community college training in the time while making a wage. Really innovative project. Can send you guys more on that. I had to talk a little bit just quickly about Commissioner Greg Puckett from Mercer County, West Virginia, who's currently this year the chair of NACO's Rural Action Caucus. So just an example of what a community champion in Sparkplug can be. Commissioner Puckett literally spends his weekends painting businesses in downtown Princeton, West Virginia, sometimes with funds gathered from the community, sometimes just with his own merit. So I'm not looking at you guys, Mike or Commissioner Crawley, but here's an idea maybe. I mean, I don't know about your painting skills, but just an example of how community leaders are so dedicated. Eastern Kentucky doing everything from retraining to coding into the project called App Harvest. We're doing a lot of work in agriculture there. Again, I'll send that out to you guys. Talk a little bit about the West. This is just some pictures. Arvin mentioned the Coal Reliant Communities Challenge. Across Western Colorado, counties and communities are taking a lot of different approaches. We did a peer learning event in Delta County, Colorado, who really sought to go on their assets of agriculture and entrepreneurship and energy. They have a world-class training center, Solar Energy International, that they have been able to train some workers who have been displaced from mining, but you know that approach, obviously the last thing you want to do is train a whole bunch of miners or folks that have been displaced, and then there are no jobs for that. So that goes hand in hand with kind of building a little bit of the market in solar, and they worked with NACO through the SolSmart program, which really helps communities build that market for solar through community solar or rooftop solar, bulk purchasing. That folks that are retrained in solar can have a little bit more constant work than just moving from large-scale solar sites to sites. Other places in Western Colorado, such as Craig, probably read about them in the news, are doing some innovative stuff with capitalizing on the river and outdoor recreation, which we've heard about from Southwest Virginia, and partnering with their community college. Again, I think that's really key. I was just in Utah for a week or so recently in October. Carbon and Emery County there, which is Price, Utah, and neighboring areas are doing some really innovative stuff. I won't go into all of it. They're really capitalizing on world-class rock climbing, and then at the same time, and this just goes to show the diverse opportunities coal communities are looking at. They are trying to tap into, as I understand it, harvesting medical isotopes from thorium, which is kind of one piece of nuclear power, nuclear energy. And so that's over my community planner head, I think, for a little bit and trying to learn more. But they would be the only place in the country harvesting medical isotopes. And it just goes to show, too, that a county commissioner leading that is a coal miner, and that that's a national story that needs to be told, of how, just an example of how smart and technical savvy these folks working in coal communities are. Nearby here in northern Arizona, obviously they've had the NGS shut down. I just wanted to share this quickly. I'll just do the community story about Van. You'll see that in the center. That's me with Van. He works at Antelope Canyon. He used to work in the mines, Vietnam veteran, got retrained in any number of things, and that includes photography and Instagram and biology. Really world-class guide through Antelope Canyon, and just putting a human face to some of these stories that people have the opportunity to transition and inspire other folks. Colstrip, Montana, I'll just quickly say that they're doing a lot too. Happy to share their plan. They probably put together one of the best, full-on plans that we've seen, kind of all put together, what they want to do. And then they did a really great storytelling campaign to really put a face, again, to, if these power plants close, this is our livelihood. These are our community folks, our residents. We love our community, and just to think about that, but also to help continue to build that buy-in for community investment in the case that power plant does close. I'll wrap up a little bit with Wyoming. They're working on a lot of innovative things. I definitely want to make sure of all these counties to connect you guys here in San Juan with what they're doing in Campbell County, Wyoming. I see a lot of connections. Obviously, they have the outdoor recreation that's huge for Wyoming, but they're really looking at advanced uses of carbon. And we haven't talked much about that yet. I think there's still a lot of folks just still working on that, and look forward to hopefully reporting back soon. They want to brand their area as Carbon Valley. I think we've seen a trend there that folks across coal communities want to be the next energy research hub, and I think that's awesome. There can be multiple ones. It doesn't need to be a competition. And Carbon County, or Campbell County, is looking at really all kinds of innovative work of what you can do with coal, with the theory that, as many would say, that it's more valuable to do advanced work with than to burn it. And I'll close with the communities part quickly. Just as former Governor Matt Mead said, I think really frames everything really well. He said this at one of our events. I will not accept we don't control our own fate. If we're the cowboy state, if we're the self-reliant, independent state, certainly we should have the courage to say we're going to make a better future for ourselves and our young people, and not be our future not be beholden to global markets. And I am from Washington, D.C. after all, so we got to have an acronym. So we developed this COAL, just to kind of recap a little bit of what we talked about. Cooperate, that's with other communities, within your own community. Observe, learning from other communities, assessing your own community. Adapt, probably the word of the past year plus, right? Adapt, and leverage. Leverage everything possible, money, resources, partnerships. Quickly, I won't go through all these. We talked about a lot of this. I'll just lastly say, and as baseball seems to be changing, my Atlanta Braves won the World Series with hitting a lot of home runs, so we're gonna have to look at changing this acronym, or this analogy. But I think it's still important to focus on hitting singles and not necessarily focus on hitting home runs and trying to necessarily replace all jobs at once, or on one big swing. That we can build an economy back by several jobs at a time, and every little focus area that you heard from these coal communities is not the one answer. They're working on many number of things, and it's all kind of putting those pieces together. Just quickly, here's some resources you can find us: NACO.org, diversifyeconomies.org. I'll send all these out. I'll send some of these resources out too, just for folks that may be interested. NACO's had some partnerships and some of these guides, outdoor recreation and solar and wind energy. And lastly, of course, I'll just flag some NACO otherwise resources. We are your one-stop shop for, I will say, anything on COVID-19 recovery, especially as it relates to the state and local dollars that are direct to counties, and have worked hand in hand with Treasury on that guidance and the rollout of that. And for that, we want to hear from you guys in the community too, through our Untold Stories platform. So I think we would mostly want that to come from the county. So if you guys have thoughts about the human impact of community services and what you guys would want and need from some of the investment, relay that to Mike and Arvin as well. So that's it for me. I'm sorry it was a little lengthy. As I said, could talk about this all day. Hopefully you guys have found this a little bit valuable, and just kind of hearing a snapshot of what we've seen and what some other communities have been up to, and we'll be happy to send you guys much more information in a recap. I got cards. Come talk to me after, but there's my email as well. Thank you guys so much for having me, Arvin and New Mexico.
Thank you, Jack. And then again, we've got cards available for question and answers. Could I ask Nancy if you and maybe Carmen could see if there's some cards we can pick up? And while we're getting ourselves situated with lights, I'd like to thank Delegate Amber Crotty for coming, the Navajo Nation. Welcome. And also like to recognize Chair of our board, Stephen Gray, sitting in the back there. with his wife Rose. We have Vince Moffett. I saw him over here somewhere. There he is. John Byram in the back over here. So again, members of the board, thank you for that. So looking at questions, I guess I'll start one off as you're picking things up, Jack. Looking at the western portions of the U.S. here and the communities that are moving forward, what would you say are some of the areas of strength, and then what are some of the areas that these communities have had to work through in order to start seeing positive change begin to happen within the communities?
Sure, I'll start with the latter part, even though I don't like to necessarily dwell on gaps and what folks can do better. But I think as far as the challenge, this is, as already said, this is really daunting stuff. We're talking about reinventing an economy, and I think that's been a way of life and a culture and a society issue in a lot of coal communities. That is huge. So just getting that initial buy-in, I think, has been a challenge, and a lot of that goes to, you could have folks like you guys in the room today too, but as you have turnover in elected officials, that consistency can have effects there too. COVID was a little bit of a challenge as far as meeting and having these opportunities, as well as such a strong impact on local businesses, especially a lot of coal communities that naturally focus on their assets and developed hospitality industry, small business like we were talking about. That's a huge hit right on top of a reinventing economy, restructuring economy. I think, Arvin, one of the big things that I already talked about as far as what communities are doing well is having these very structured events and coordinated opportunities here. And Arvin and I were talking, Virginia has done this very well, so it's great to hear you guys have done this model. West Virginia, Kentucky, Colorado starting to do it, where you have a big umbrella of an effort, and then there are kind of breakout groups of focus areas where you recognize different people's buy-in. We're focusing on environment and its connection to economic development. We're doing downtown and placemaking. We're doing energy. These type of breakout groups that can really build more buy-in, touch larger folks in the community. Let's see. Drought resiliency. Interesting question. Yeah, so the work I do also touches NACO's Resilient Counties Advisory Board and gets into disaster resiliency. So even bigger than drought, that's come up in some communities across the West. Most notably, I've had a lot of those conversations with Routt County, Colorado, which is famously home of Steamboat Springs, but also small town Hayden with a coal-fired power plant. So they're in a real interesting location where they climate and a changing climate, and the issues like drought and disasters of wildfires, a shorter ski season have a huge impact on their economy, and whether folks will be coming to their community, while at the same time that efforts to reduce carbon are going to obviously have an impact on their coal-fired power plant and local tax revenues. So there, I think that's just an example of communities having that conversation and how they're connected. And I'd be happy to share, whoever was that asked that question can come talk to me afterwards about what NACO's done to kind of work with counties for disaster resilience too. I think that a lot of those efforts, such as nature-based strategies and disaster infrastructure, are job creating opportunities too, and so that's important to think about as well.
One question again that's come forward, kind of looking at infrastructure. It's talking about rail. We need rail, and what can we do in Washington to to really get that attention, but really infrastructure as a whole. We're looking at broadband development here. We're looking at competing with the hydrogen hub designation aspects, et cetera. What would you suggest in terms of getting that message out to make sure that we're considered as we look at these types of large infrastructure needs in our county?
Sure. I think a lot of that message about infrastructure is out there, and I think that obviously work can continue, especially from the coal communities and other rural counties impact. I think that's a role that NACO can help play in making sure that perspective and voice is represented, and we've been doing so and kind of making sure we're having conversations, and we'll continue to do so more with the administration's interagency work group for coal communities, and to make sure that the county perspective is really well represented there, and that infrastructure is key for you all in this position. I think there is a lot of opportunities in the infrastructure bill that will create a lot of opportunity for local communities to tap into. We have an expert transportation legislative director, Jessica Jennings, that will soon be, I'm sure, putting out a full recap of the legislation that just passed and dollars that means for communities. But that does a lot of opportunity for broadband there. Rail, I'll have to double check. Broadband also certainly opportunities with utilizing your direct funding for the state and local funding from COVID recovery too. Broadband included in that.
Another question, looking at outdoor recreation, you talked about a number of communities looking at that. However, there are so many guiding opportunities and entrepreneur aspects, and then looking at displaced workers from highly industrial industry, looking at outdoor recreation, there's a big discrepancy in terms of income and et cetera. What do you see with other communities? How are some of those handling that, or how some of the individuals looking at that prospect?
Arvin, if I had that answer, I'd be a very wealthy man, and I'm sure I would still be coming here to talk to you guys, though. No, that's the big challenge, right? That's a lot of the community's, huge asset as well is outdoor recreation, and that's really important to tap into, whether you're having, in the good days of coal or other natural resource extraction. Those are great things for your economy. Recreation is bigger than tourism and does have some opportunities, but that's the challenge, right? As far as thinking about it as that from a change of employment in the coal industry to something more in recreation and hospitality. I would encourage to think about then the role that recreation and other experience economy investments can have for building that long-term economy, and not necessarily thinking about it as we're a coal community and we've changed to recreation. And obviously you want to celebrate what you're working on, and I think a lot of the media stories want to have a nice story about we've turned into this, but I will say that recreation does have an opportunity to attract new residents and then businesses to your community that can then start their own businesses in any number of sectors. There's a whole growing trend of quality of life, and that is drawing economic development. I think COVID has likely even furthered that, the importance of wanting to be in areas where you can recreate and open space and work from anywhere, really. When I worked in Virginia, kind of dubbed those as double quality of life businesses. So the quality of life attracted you to a community, and then you in turn started a business that furthers that quality of life in itself. There's a number of communities trying to tap into manufacturing of outdoor recreation goods and products, and coal to products even has a role in that when thinking about carbon fiber. And so that's one angle that you could really get into some of those more higher wage opportunities. Actually, just remembering of Kane County Kane County, Utah, from the Denver event, talked about their effort to attract the one percenters. And that's not probably what you're thinking of the one percenters, but their theory is that if we can capture even 1% of the tourists that come recreate in our community to want to even move here or start a business here, that is a huge win. And so I think that's a really interesting strategy and branding effort that Kane County had there in regards to recreation. That's a topic that I really am interested in and would love to. I could talk all day about that, Arvin, but I think that it's not either. It needs to be looked at not as a this or, but kind of a both and. That outdoor recreation and tourism and downtown revitalization that can come with it are good practices, regardless, in good times, bad times, otherwise. And so, and thinking about that for really a branding of your community and telling your community story and bringing in new folks and outsiders is a role that it can play.
One of the things that we're looking at here with Four Corners Economic Development is bringing different ideas and bringing different learnings here into the region here, and developing discussions or start discussions in different areas as we begin to look at how do we that interaction between the communities, and what kind of results have you seen as a result of some of that interaction?
Yeah, great question, Arvin, and should have touched a little bit on that more too. We've seen a lot of examples and testimonials about that. That's why I thought it was important to make sure that you hear and learn about Appalachia, and that I've been kind of almost obsessed with the idea of making sure that this peer learning kind of cohort between Appalachian coal communities in the West exists. And so we've tried to bring Appalachian communities out to our events in the West. Arvin was lucky enough to go to West Virginia. We've had a couple of experiences there. I think it's really important for folks in the West, a lot of circumstances like you all here, to learn from Appalachia as coal declined in that region. Then they've been faced with poverty for decades plus. And so I think that's important to learn from them, try to get ahead, right, to going back to that, being prepared, and to already start building on diverse economies before the shock or drop. Let's see some examples. The folks from Appalachia have learned a lot from communities in the West about, to the last question about how to build recreation economies. That's something new to a lot of those communities, despite their assets. I cited an example of Doug from Virginia sharing about the small business launch and pop-up shop competition that was kind of really well met in Colorado, and started there. Example of the idea exchange. We have several of those that could also go into. I think one thing I meant to say as well too, just to connect it back to COVID and future shocks too, the importance of peer learning and learning from others and putting together your kind of teams and your plan, is that we heard from several communities that when COVID hit, they were perhaps better prepared than maybe other communities that hadn't gone through that process of already thinking about who their stakeholders are, who their team was, who that human infrastructure of like a Four Corners is, and they were able to rally quickly nimbly and kind of react to COVID. And so I think that kind of proves they're well served for future shocks as well, to kind of speak to the importance of not only peer learning, but the intentional idea of creating those action plans and teams.
Thank you, Jack. We've got time for a couple more questions, if there's a couple more questions out there. Yes?
I have a question. In one of the first slides that you put up, you showed just the two maps with like kind of the heat maps of coal producing communities and then coal-fired power plants. So if I'm remembering correctly, it was 150 to maybe a little over 300. And so what I was wondering is, obviously we can see our community double dips. You know, we have both the coal producing and the coal-fired power plant. So I'm curious what that looks like for our community. Is it typical that a lot of these communities you're working with have both ends of this, coal kind of reliance in our community, whereas a lot of the other communities, potentially 150 more, don't even have coal producing opportunities in their community. So that's not I'm just wondering, do you feel that puts us at a deficit to work up from as a community because we're affected on both ends?
Great question. So for those that didn't hear, she was asking about the maps and the overlap between communities that are both coal producing and have coal-fired power plants. That's actually a really great question, and we can try to run that map to get a better sense of that overlap. I think that's probably a little bit more prevalent in a lot of the western communities than in Appalachia or others. I'm just thinking back to all those 11 teams that came to Denver. I think almost all of them were, in one way or the other, were faced with both, maybe excluding Delta County in Colorado. So I think that's it's obviously a double kind of compounding that potentially lose both, and I think that's why there's such it's going to be such a challenge, or is such a challenge of uncertainty. I could look at the numbers and try to get a more accurate sense for you there. That's a great question.
Yeah.
We're actually hoping to do all kinds of revamping on our maps for this coal impacted work, where we'll hopefully be able to show some of the declines and highlight counties that were maybe coal reliant even 10 years ago, but aren't showing up on a map from 2019 to make sure they're not left out, and also try to figure out a way that we can also not forget about those counties that may be coal impacted through transportation or service sector or something that aren't even coming up in those maps of coal producing or coal-fired power plant, because obviously it's beyond just those counties too.
Do you have a follow-up on?
I was just going to say that more than just curiosity about the statistic, I think that we could really benefit a lot more in like the kind of that peer cohort you're mentioning about how communities can really get together and learn from each other. Communities like ours that would have that double dip, I think that we would be able to learn a lot more from communities that also are experiencing that, because it's so many additional layers of climbing out of that.
No, absolutely. So I was talking to Arvin. Hopefully, in the near future, we'll have some expanded and relaunched Coal Communities Network efforts and peer learning, and so that's great feedback to make sure those counties are connected. We need to think of a name for them.
An acronym.
Yeah, we need an acronym or a sports analogy, right?
Yes.
So I was curious with your partnership so if you could give me an example, was there any conversations, the uniqueness here is San Juan County and Farmington, these resources in working with a sovereign nation like Navajo Nation. So I can't think of any tribes that have investment in West Virginia, but in Montana or in your other areas, what was that type of relationship, and And as we move forward with our nation, our enterprises who are running some of the power plants, there's going to be some additional nuance that we would need help and support. So if you could give me an idea if you have any experience or any recommendations from that kind of uniqueness that we're seeing here in our Fort Collins area.
Thank you. That's a great question. I hope everyone heard about a connection with tribal communities. We've done that a little bit, and certainly through part of this new effort that we'll hopefully have, we want to do that a lot more. The biggest example I think I can give you is, we talked a little bit about northern Arizona, so the work that they're doing in Coconino County and Page. I've worked so much with such a great tireless leader, Lena Fowler. Did you know Supervisor Fowler? Great. She's outstanding, and so I came to a similar event as this maybe 2-3 years ago in their community, kind of a kickoff of economic development collaboration between the county, city of Page, and Navajo Nation, as I understand it. And so I think that there still is, they had a formal agreement with the city and the county, and so I'm not sure the status of the formality yet of having the Navajo Nation as an official member of that collaboration, but her goal is to have that be hand in hand in partnership and have a role, and that's the idea of that collaboration there. Obviously, in that community, the Native American population made up a significant percentage of folks that were working at the Navajo generating station. We were just talking with folks in Montana. You mentioned Montana. Pretty significant numbers there that are involved in the coal industry in southeast Montana as well. I'd love us to work on efforts to uplift those stories and help facilitate that further. The EDA has, specifically in the ARPA funds, have funding for tribal communities, and hopefully with our coal communities cohort, we'll be able to specifically partner with those communities as well.
Well, we'll end with Carol's question. I know people are busy, but go ahead, Carol.
I have been thinking for about 3 or 4 years, and I visited with several San Juan County leaders about an idea that, my God, right up there on the hill, we have the largest farm cooperative of its kind in the world. We have Native American. I have a master's degree in Navajo history. I used to run a little bitty Southwest Scout tour group. The only reason I stopped, it was work. And I got a lot of interest from German people. They're very interested in the Southwest, the Native American, and I have this idea, and I think I've gotten inspired to use some energy to get it coordinated, but I need help. I want to start with a little on-the-road breakfast. We can use Bloomfield school buses, I think, if we pay them, because my daughter's a superintendent, to gather the people and tour that NAPI project. It is amazing. I work with them off and on different things, so I know the people. Then we can come to my house for lunch and show them what a tiny little family farm with my 3 daughters and sons-in-law and I run. Then we can have an evening fun thing at San Juan Wines to look at potential. Now somehow we have to throw in hemp, and I don't really want to, because I was a high school principal and I don't believe in that stuff. But I think it's also a growing industry, because I serve on the Lee Hammond Water Board, and we're getting requests for water to grow hemp. And we have to watch out. Some counties in this state are using up all their drinking water by hemp groups coming in and wanting it. So we have to sort of look at that in the future. But I just got off of 3 commissions. I'm only on 1 now. I wrote a book, painted some pictures. I'm ready to have a new project. So I'm going to meet with Arvin, and I hope Stetson again, develop my plan, get it down, and see where I need help and can I get it. So is that a good idea? Think of all the international people that would come and use our hotels and stuff.
I'll let Arvin respond to that locally, but I think that's a fantastic idea, and I didn't get too much of a chance to go into that for some of the communities in Appalachia, but agritourism, local foods, regional food system is really booming right now, and capturing on that local, authentic piece of that is really a growth opportunity that I can share with you if we can connect cards afterwards. A lot of good work being done by a group called Appalachian Sustainable Development that are really growing the local foods movement there in Appalachia, helping them get those, not only the tourism piece, bringing folks to there, but helping farmers market to those urban destinations for folks. I mean, it's really a growth opportunity. You got people craving to get out to go to the pumpkin patches or the wineries and all. And so I think from my point of view, yes, it fits with a lot of trends that we're seeing nationally.
Thank you, Jack. And yes, Carol, we'll need to get together and talk about those opportunities and see how we can move forward. But Jack, I'd like to thank you for meeting with us this morning and bringing your taste as to what's happening not only around the country, but here in the western portions of the U.S. with communities like ours. And again, we are looking at a number of different initiatives as we move forward, the railroad. We've got $2 million now that it has been released, and we are in the processes of going out for an RFP to get an engineering firm here to start that planning effort with the Navajo Nation. And that's the key. We have an MOU with the Navajo Nation to bring rail here to San Juan County, and so that's one of the things we're working on. We've got a coalition developed, looking at broadband development and partnering with Farmington Electric. You know, I was worried about having a middle mile plan, but Farmington Electric has a full scale down to the last mile plan, looking at $140 million to bring broadband throughout San Juan County within their territory, service territory. And so that, in connections with what the Navajo Nation as well as Southwest Colorado is doing, would really bring broadband here to the given Four Corners region. That, along with the hydrogen hub designation, working hard on developing the asset map to begin that aspect. Educating ourselves on exactly what hydrogen is about and what are our assets, what areas do we lack, and what's the gap between, and how do we fix those areas. The other thing, as I was talking to Jack about, was the pump storage project that we are currently envisioning on the western side of the county, looking at the Tisnaspas and Maclabatol. We've had meetings with those communities. Those communities are interested. But just like everybody else, they're wary. They're looking at us saying, okay, keep telling us, help us understand. And so we're in those early meetings with them, but again, looking at how we can develop our energy aspects, and then coming down even further, looking at film. We got groups together now. We're ready to see if we can move forward with the development of film office here in the county. Our business retention and expansion effort. Our outdoor recreation, we had a city of Farmington hosted the state conference a few weeks ago. And now we are looking at how do we continue to enhance that effort. Retirement, we're looking at how we can move forward with that. Agriculture, we've got a summit planned right now with our growers coming to meet the buyers to really determine where do we go next with our food to table initiatives. And so there's a lot of enthusiasm. We've been able to, with the help of Ken Hare and the Food Hub, we've been able to bring our farmers markets together in an alliance where they're working together now. And so that coupled with the food hub, we're seeing some real opportunities there. We had a chance to visit some of the culinary aspects with Farmington High School, Aztec starting to start some stuff, Bloomfield starting some stuff, Kirtland with Central Consolidated. So there's a lot happening here. And again, we need to make sure that we continue to be informed and we continue to support these efforts. The way I kind of look at it is that you are the disciples out there. You're the ones that need to help spread that knowledge. We have the newsletter. We're looking at people participating in our teams because, again, that's how we get information about the county. I don't know everything about Aztec or Bloomfield. I'm from Fruitland. I know Kirtland. I'm beginning to know Farmington. And again, that's what I'm wanting to do, is to spread my information and knowledge. I know the chapters very well. How do we begin to do that? And more importantly, how do we begin to cut down the militarized zone that we have, that we call the San Juan River? Because everything south and west of that river, we say is the Navajo Nation. They say everything north and east of the river, that's the county, and neither side talks to each other. So how do we begin to break that down? Because there's a tremendous amount of resources available on both sides, and we can then begin to move forward with that effort. So again, thank you very much. Jack's going to be around here. We're going to have another meeting with the nonprofits here in a little bit to have further our discussions. He'll be here to discuss things. I would ask again, please fill out your evaluation sheets. That information is valuable for us. This is our first one. We're going to continue to move through this process. We want people here that you're interested in, and we want to bring those learnings here to this county and exchange that information with other communities and other experts here within the region and within the nation. So again, Jack, I want to thank you for
Thank you all so much for having me.
Appreciate you coming. Thank you.